Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 332. Good things happen to those who hustle. Anis Nin.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Industry Jump. Industry Jump is a global community of verified filmmakers providing the next generation of filmmakers with the resources required to grow their businesses, learn new skills, and manage their careers. You can sign up for free. You can even create a verified portfolio, search for film crew to hire for your next projects, and learn from top-tier creators in the industry through live video mentoring. So if you want to check this out, guys, head over to industryjump.com. Today's show is also sponsored by ShotLister. Paper shot lists suck, and when something inevitably goes wrong on set, you're left to scribble all over your perfect plan. But with ShotLister, you can schedule your film shot by shot and minute by minute. Then on set, just update your shot list, and ShotLister automatically does the math so you know exactly what you're doing. Check out shotlister.com, which is available on macOS, iOS, and Android. And as a special bonus, ShotLister is giving away 50 free downloads every month. Just email indiefilmhustle@shotlister.com for your free copy. Before we get going, I want to thank everybody who came out yesterday and liked, subscribed, gave me reviews, shared everything about Filmtrepreneur, man. Thank you guys so much. The love and support was endless and extremely humbling. I am so glad you guys love what I've done with Filmtrepreneur and what I'm going to be doing with Filmtrepreneur moving forward. So thank you guys so much. And again, if you are listening to this podcast and you have not subscribed yet to Filmtrepreneur's podcast, please head over to filmbizpodcast.com. That's filmbiz podcast.com. Subscribe and leave a review. Put a 5-star review. Leave a review if you want to as well. It really helps us out a lot. We're already up to, I think, 16 reviews within a 24-hour period, which is insane. So I really appreciate it. So please do as much as you can to help and support the new brand, the new company. We're all part of the same tribe, Indie Film Hustle tribe, Filmtrepreneur tribe. We're all part of the same tribe. But thank you guys again so much. Today on the show, we have Andrew Kortschak, who is going to be talking about AI in the world of cinema and how AI is possibly going to take over the screenwriting process. I don't know. We're going to talk about it. He is the co-founder of NQ, a production company behind the indie films Cop Car, which was a big hit in the box office, and Print the Legend. Now, when Andrew co-founded NQ, he kind of saw that there was a really tough time for new filmmakers to break into the business and kind of like rise above all the noise. So his approach was very unique. He joined forces with a Silicon Valley venture capitalist to build NQ like a tech startup via a bi-coastal incubator model where directors could cut their teeth and build their portfolios doing commercial work. One of his alumni is Jon Watts, who directed the award-winning film Cop Car before he headed over to direct a small little Marvel movie called Spiderman Homecoming. And then again, he figured out that there was more pain points for young producers. So at NQ, he actually sprouted groundbreaking AI technology to save time during the screenwriting process. Andrew's a fascinating guy, and it was a great conversation. So I want to dig into this because AI has been in the news of, we've seen AI cut a trailer, AI write a screenplay, edit together movies. Like it's a thing, guys. I know for us right now thinking, AI will never take over the creative process. Maybe not. We don't know. We're in the infancy of this new technology. So I wanted to see how it really affects not only filmmakers, but indie filmmakers moving forward. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Andrew Kortschak. I'd like to welcome to the show Andrew Kortschak. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So first off, man, how did you get into the film business?
I got into the film business based on I don't know, childhood love of film, and, slowly building towards making myself an invaluable part of the process, or at least striving to be one. That's kind of, it's been a long path, but have had a great time doing it.
Very cool. Now, you also went to USC, right?
I did, yes. That's where things really got kind of kicked into gear.
Yeah. How was your USC experience? I've spoken to USC many times, and I know a lot of USC grads. So I've heard, many different experiences outside of a USC, out of the bubble of USC. Can you tell us what that experience was like and how it was for you?
Sure. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I also timed things quite well in that I got to take advantage of the new facilities graciously donated by George Lucas and several others. So it was always nice, walking into something that felt like a real film studio as a 18-year-old. But I can only speak from my own personal experience. I was a little bit of an odd bird there because I was very, very focused on animation and documentary work at the time. And I think USC has a reputation for developing great studio filmmakers, studio executives, and representatives. And I personally struggled a little bit with having to wear every hat. By then I knew I was not interested in directing personally, but you have to go through the process, and I do absolutely see the value in that.
Now, did you when you got out of school, you had your first internship at Pixar, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Actually, I took some time off of school to go do that.
Even better.
Back in 2010, exactly.
Even better. I used to jump off and go to Universal Studios and do my internships there, and not go to class. Do you find it so invaluable to learn? You learn so much more doing internships, I feel, so much than you do in film school sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's how I would kind of sum up film school. I mean, there's absolute value in going. And I think, across the board, I've worked with talented people who have gone to a variety of different schools, some more liberal arts focused, others that are these kind of, classic, film schools like NYU, UCLA, or USC. But really, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head that the best way to get, your hands on material and kind of see how things are done in the real world is to get these kind of early internship experiences.
Now, what was it like working at Pixar? I've never had the pleasure of walking into that magical factory that I've seen so many times on behind-the-scenes videos. What is it like working there?
It was a life-changing and somewhat scary experience. My first day, I don't think I'd ever filled out a W-9 before. So I think I claimed 99 dependents or something insane like that. So they obviously could tell I wasn't very good at paperwork back then. But I was so fortunate in that I had known Corey Ray and Darla Anderson, two amazing producers there, and they had, kind of slowly mentored me as I, come out of high school and, specifically, decided to focus on animation. And I was there the summer they were releasing Toy Story 3. Mm-hmm. So I walked in and was greeted by I would say 40-foot tall, life-size recreation of Ken's dream house with Barbie in tow and all the costumes. And then I can't remember the name of the pink bear, but he did smell strawberries and was about 8 feet tall and imposing. So it was, that made a major impression on me. And I'd obviously grown up, on their movies. I'd also been the same age as Andy in every Toy Story movie as they had been released. So it felt personal, but I was lucky enough to get to work on Monsters University, which was in its early stages at that point.
And what is the process like? I've heard the stories of how they actually go through the process of making these films, that it takes years and years and years of like development, and there are different floors that you can't get to and certain things like that, depending on where all the cool ideas are at. Is that true?
Yeah, it is, it is fairly segmented in a way. I mean, there's a great alleyway of animators who, based on the, breadth of work that they're asked to do, on a daily basis, they are, allowed to build out their offices in whatever way
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
They desire. I mean, I saw hidden whiskey rooms and tiki bars, and it wasn't all, drinking establishments, but, all kinds of different, cool stuff to kind of make it personal because, that's it, they're the best of the best and it's a demanding environment. I was very fortunate in that the folks who were in charge of my time at Pixar, very graciously understood that, if I wasn't able to be a value add on the day on Monsters University, just based on, kind of where the story reels were at, they would allow me to go, sit in and take notes on, other meetings. So seeing, story and shot filing meetings for Cars 2, Brave was in production at the time. It was just an amazing time to be there and really, it was just, as I said before, a deeply formative experience in terms of, what I was able to, kind of grab from it.
Now, what was the biggest lesson you learned from working there?
I think that story is king, and also just solving problems on paper. I think, and the last thing I would add is, having patience. I think, as you alluded to, these movies do take a long time and they have a whole process, and, they do have it down to a bit of a science, but I think at the same time, allowing stories to ebb and flow and breathe and get different opinions and take it through the brain trust process. I think, all of those things work in conjunction to, support the filmmaker's voice there, and also keep it, a democratic process within reason. And certainly just having patience, especially as a kind of a producer who works most heavily in development, was just, it took me a couple years to realize it, but I think just having patience for letting something, kind of slowly unfurl without pressuring the process or different stakeholders was hugely formative for me.
Now, what is NQ?
NQ is a film production firm based in Culver City. We harness all kinds. I'm from Silicon Valley originally, so I definitely grew up, in and around the tech scene. And so, as I alluded to before, we work most often in the development space. I love, touching material as early as I can, whether it's finding books, pre-release galleys, articles from years ago, kind of things that have been picked over by others. We just love, getting our hands on material and either placing it with filmmakers or working to help shape it, in support of, a filmmaker's vision. While in that process, we've built several tools driven by AI to, support filmmakers, when they raise their hand or, inform the process. And as I alluded to before, solve problems on paper.
Now, what are some of these Silicon Valley principles that you bring that helped create NQ and makes it a little bit different than other production companies in town?
I think having a more progressive and calm working atmosphere than some of the things I was exposed to. I don't want to incriminate anybody, but the horror stories I've heard or experiences I had, coming up in the business. I think, one thing that's important to me is supporting folks throughout the process, not just hiring the best of the best and compounding, people on top of one another. I think, I enjoy working with young filmmakers. I like, the opportunity to mentor my, kind of young colleagues as well and, give them maybe more responsibility than they were expecting and, kind of allow them to learn lessons on their own. So that's certainly one thing that I was exposed to, just growing up in the era of Google, and I guess I shouldn't be talking about Facebook as a reference point, but Silicon Valley, especially during the tech bubble in early 2000s, was just a fascinating place to grow up and to kind of hear different opinions and how people from all around the world kind of came together to, build these, tools that had the had the possibility of, kind of really changing the landscape of the planet and how people interact with one another. So, I mean, I tried to distill that down in my own way whilst running a, kind of lean and mean production company.
Now, when you are hiring people or bringing people in, what are you looking for as part of a team building situation? Because, from my understanding of Silicon Valley principles, from what I've studied, it is quite different than your general old school production company here, where, like you were just saying, you just kind of like build up this kind of like either competitive situation, or there's like, the hierarchies. It's not it's very much like what Pixar did with the brain trust. Like that concept was completely alien to anybody here in Hollywood before it became popular, before they popularized it. So who are you looking for, and what kind of parts are you looking for when building a team? Because I think that's important for the audience to kind of understand when they're hiring crew. It's not always the most talented. It's not only the most experienced and the biggest star that you want to hire, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, several of the things I really look for are obviously passion and energy. And then I also put a, huge emphasis on creative taste. In terms of, working with, different filmmakers and, directors, writers, other producers, et cetera, at the end of the day, I think all people really have is their taste. Experience is one thing, but every movie is a different beast, as you know. So you kind of learn on the fly, and that's, I think what you were alluding to about, getting, hands-on experience as an intern or PA, what have you. So I do place a big part of my interview process really is talking about movies and TV shows that people enjoy, what they enjoy about them, and, helping to understand, kind of how that taste profile fits in to a company like NQ, and also challenges, those that are already there.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about the script writing AI that you created, that your company created, which I find fairly scary and fascinating both at the same time?
Sure. It's not meant to be scary. So this actually originated with a filmmaker named Oscar Sharp, who had teamed up with a AI researcher named Ross Goodwin. I was not involved in the early days of their, of them kind of philosophically, putting this stuff together, but that resulted in a project called Sunspring that we submitted to the, I believe, London 48-Hour Film Festival. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of caught hook, line, and sinker by them and their pitch, in terms of getting involved, and the opportunity to just shoot over a weekend and be done was also very attractive. That was a fascinating experience. We worked with Thomas Middleditch on it, who did an amazing job of kind of selling the technology, even though narratively it didn't, make a ton of sense, if you will. Mm-hmm. So from there, it was clear that the response that I felt I would get, and just in terms of my personal philosophy, was that replacing screenwriters was not something I was interested in, and that screenwriters are some of the people I enjoy working with most. And so we then took a step back and tried to figure out a way in which we were able to support folks and really arm them with tools that as I said, aid their process, kind of from script to screen. So, whether it's, helping with, story breakdowns, giving, some perspective and advice on structure, or at least tracking structural changes, especially for more complicated, kind of structural situations. Mm-hmm. I think that's been, a very helpful tool. And specifically, that's one where, Jon Watts has been an amazing resource as a, kind of admitted structure nerd. Mm-hmm. And, selfishly for my purposes, one of the things that's been amazing, in terms of harnessing AI has been specifically applying that technology to the budgeting and scheduling process, mm-hmm. which is something that, I am not a line producer. I work with lots of amazing line producers who make my life far easier than it should be. Mm-hmm. However, it is a process working with them.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And it, scripts evolve, all this kind of stuff. And, I get sent a variety of different, material where, people are kind of ballparking numbers over the phone. And I've learned my lessons in the past about backing into, specific numbers. And so building a tool where I'm just at least able to kind of drag and drop a PDF and get a, kind of budget top sheet, just as a ballpark for my own internal purposes, has proven totally invaluable.
So stop right there. So you actually have a program that does that? Like literally you drop a screenplay on there and it will give you a rough estimate of what this thing's going to cost?
We do, yeah.
That's insane.
It's been a lot, and it's been a lot of fun to develop. I'm very fortunate to work with some incredibly smart folks who, took a major interest in applying their problem-solving skills from a totally different discipline, and have attempted to kind of make my life easier. Is this something that's just internally used, or do you actually have it out for sale, or is that now it is? It's not for sale yet. We this, as I'm sure you're aware, this industry, especially from the studio level down, is fairly tech averse.
Yes. Why is that?
And, people are set in their ways. And I think, what I hear time and time again is that movies have been made the same way for 100+ years, and why change it now? So
right. That's what Netflix said.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think, for now, it's been the kind of thing that I've, shared with friends and other line producers. And again, we're very early days in this, kind of stuff. And so I would kind of characterize this as an experimental software still, but still one that informs our process and that is just constantly, fun to interact with.
Now, where do you see AI playing a part in the film business moving forward?
I'm going to likely get in trouble for saying this, but I would say that we are probably 20 years away from a convincing AI screenplay, that would trick a normal audience. This is my personal opinion. So, sure. And also, I don't want to subjugate writers and I want to support them and, give them more tools, to kind of extend, what folks like myself and, my collaborators and colleagues are able to kind of, help them do. So, in terms of, AI applications, I would say certainly, in the budgeting and scheduling software, which is an art in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And, talented ADs and line producers are just invaluable allies to have, heading into, differently sized movies or when you start to get out of your comfort zone. And I would also say, other people have dabbled with this as well, but just using, with all of this Siri and Alexa and Google Voice, technology that's being harnessed, finding a way. One thing that I was interested in as well is, building a kind of virtual table read. So with the same drag and drop kind of software, allowing writers or directors to basically be able to bring their script to life just in a, kind of preliminary sense in advance of sharing it with other human beings in case they were, too modest or unwilling to do so at that stage. I think, just like a writer will often read things out loud as they're writing, inviting in, the table read process, which is something that, kind of permeates all other levels of filmmaking and certainly is, a mandate at many levels, I think is something that is massively helpful in, helping to, kind of diagnose where a script is at and what could improve.
Now, I have to ask you, because you made a very bold statement. I know you're going to get in trouble for it, but I just want to dig into it a little bit deeper with the 20 years in the script writing. How would AI, because I mean, I want to understand it from your point of view. I mean, I'm a writer. I mean, and I've worked with many writers and I've spoken to some of the biggest writers in Hollywood. Their process is so organic, so the algorithm in their mind, if you will, to create what they create comes from life experience, comes from so many different influences. How can an AI even come close to that? Or how would it just work, in your opinion? Like, how would an AI create? I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just curious on the process, if there is an answer to that question.
I absolutely hear where you're coming from. And that's, that I would echo the same sentiment. I think that, it is, it's an art form, and it's one that no matter how many scripts you train an AI on, which is really, the kind of foundation of the process as I understand it, it in many ways is still parroting things that it was fed. Mm-hmm. And we were able to harness that for Sunspring in a way that, we had a fun sci-fi short film that emerged from training an AI on X-Files, Star Trek, and Star Wars scripts, which was amazing, but you got a specific kind of movie out of it. Right. And
that's so scary for Hollywood. Can you imagine them just dumping in a whole bunch of Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and Pixar movies and like seeing what they could spit out the other end?
Yeah. I would hope that movie would make an enormous amount of money, because otherwise, why would you do it? But, I think that, again, I think we're in agreement that, I'm most interested in, tools that supplement and extend people's abilities rather than replacing them.
Yeah, and I think I personally think that's where AI will come into play, where it will make life a lot easier. But I think even like on the budgeting and the scheduling side of things, it might give you a good head start on a process, but then you would need a line producer to come in, or a first AD to come in to kind of tweak it. But it might be able to give you a hell of a head start. Would that make sense? Absolutely. And we're seeing this every day with companies like Final Draft and Writer Duet. Every few months they're rolling out new, feature sets, that are additive to the process and do help organize things. And I think that's great. And so if that's the easiest point of adoption for, writers and directors, to kind of find and discover this technology, that's awesome, and in many ways how it should be. Now, do you believe that, because I agree with you, the studios are so stuck in their ways that it's extremely difficult for them to even move an inch, let alone when Netflix showed up, everyone was laughing at them. But then they've literally become one of the biggest studios in town, doing it in a completely different way and delivering content in a completely different way. Do you believe that a lot of this kind of technology or AI kind of tech would make its way down more into the indie film world, more and more of these lower budget films, where then it slowly will go up the ladder?
I certainly hope so. Being a young guy myself, I hope that other, kind of young and up and coming filmmakers I work with, learn the value of these kind of tools, in a way that is additive, and not a crutch, and, can, as you had alluded to, really, kind of grow with this, and when they're major forces of nature within the industry, kind of make this a mandate as part of their process. So I think just interjecting as early as possible, in whatever way is supportive, if somebody is interested in harnessing this kind of tech, I think that's always been our strategy in terms of adoption.
Do you see an AI directing a film?
It's funny you mentioned. I believe, I can't remember what studio put it together, but there was a very interesting AI edited trailer about a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit, kind of rinse and repeat in a way, but it was still very cool to see a polished trailer for popular consumption, kind of cut by, I believe it may have been, harnessing IBM Watson technology. Mm-hmm. In terms of directing, again, there's so many points of stimuli and parts of the directing process, as that are just meant to be, kind of gut decisions,
Right. It's art.
Come on a moment to moment basis that, I have to admit a computer may be a faster decision maker than, a human being, but I can't say it will be as informed, keeping track of, the artistic goal, dealing with personnel, continuing a vision for, for a project or a specific scene.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
That's a lot of different stuff to be juggling. And so I hope that it's something that develops, but I remain skeptical for the time being.
Now, and I'm just going to get a little sci-fi here, but wouldn't it be amazing that in I don't know when, but at a moment in time where you can literally download your mind to an AI or a computer in the whole consciousness, could you imagine like downloading James Cameron and Steven Spielberg and Chris Nolan eventually, where their creative essence continues in a non-traditional or non-organic way? Again, I'm going very sci-fi here. Wouldn't that be an insane thing? Because wouldn't it be cool to see what Hitchcock would be doing today with this technology, or Kubrick doing in today's technology? I'm just curious what your thoughts about that is. Again, going super sci-fi.
I think that could be cool. I mean, it's a good AI extension of Masterclass, really getting into the mind of, kind of a enormously, talented and special, kind of group of filmmakers. I could see that being a very cool, thing, just as long as it doesn't, create a ceiling for other filmmakers in terms of, how they want to innovate and, build their own art form.
Now, do you think filmmakers today need to be entrepreneurs in the film business, especially independent filmmakers?
I think there's certainly aspects of entrepreneurship that are important. I think just self-advocacy is one of the most important things. And that took me personally a little time to, understand. And that, everyone had to start somewhere. I remember someone taking me aside and just saying, stop, acting like this is your first rodeo, or stop telling people that, like everyone has a rookie season and, you have to build from there. Like everyone started not having any idea what they're doing. So I think, finding a balance between, self-confidence and, also, humility, in terms of, being open to learning the process from people more experienced than you and kind of taking their lessons and making it work for yourself personally, I think is important. But, in terms of, classic entrepreneurship, I think, building some sort of presence and bringing groups of people together in a way is likely the most important thing, I think, in terms of, making your, staking your claim and, kind of making your first steps in the industry. It's really important to have a group. And
can you talk a little bit about the emphasis of marketing and branding? Because I think that kind of leads into what or it kind of takes what you just said as far as self-advocacy, is that branding yourself and understanding marketing and that aspect of things, which they don't teach you in film school, but it's so important in today's world, especially in today's world of social media and also just rising above the noise. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say that, it's important to be honest with yourself in terms of the kind of movie you're interested in making, especially in your first couple hits at bat. I would also say, I would extend that to just say general self-awareness, and, people put a lot of emphasis on log lines for writers, all this kind of stuff. I think as a young director or writer-director, you should have, instant recall, as if it's an elevator pitch of, the kind of movies and tones that you want to be exploring. I think that makes a huge impact and shows me that, just as a producer, that, somebody has really thought a couple of steps ahead of the process. And, simultaneously as a producer, one of the things that became clear to me when I, entered the industry, which was around the same time that, Netflix started buying original content and creating it themselves, was that producers in today's world, and really any stakeholder, you have to be able to see the movie poster in your head from the earliest stages of the script. And I don't mean that cynically in that you know what actor and, color and all this stuff, but you have to know what kind of movie you're making and why you're making it, why it's personal to you and important to be shared with an audience and isn't just an, exercise for, one's own ego. And, really trying to, this goes back to kind of solving things on paper. I mean, I think just building a game plan, from a 30,000 foot view in terms of what you're trying to accomplish and why, I think that all plays into, a level that may not be classic entrepreneurship, but that it gives the air of, being an entrepreneur, I believe.
Now, how do you choose your projects to produce?
Great question. Some things come up organically from material that I've read or that colleagues have read and wanted to bring, inside the company, and we will place it with a filmmaker, that we like. Other things are brought to us by folks that, have made movies that we're fans of. Occasionally, we find amazing material through, different outlets, whether it's, Short of the Week, Vimeo staff picks, stuff that's graduated from the Sundance Labs, the Blacklist, all those kind of tools. We really try to keep our ear to the ground, especially at the level that we're working in terms of discovering new talent there. And, also the odd pitch, we're totally open to, kind of hearing pitches and, just kind of reacting to people's excitement and then finding a way to, support them. And
you worked with Jon Watts, right? On the director of Spiderman?
I did. Yeah. I made Cop Car with him.
So that was his first film, right? And
it was actually his second. Okay. He had made a great movie up in Canada called Clown. Mm-hmm. And because of the idiosyncrasies of the distribution process, actually Clown was released after Cop Car. So in Jon, I was incredibly spoiled as he's an amazingly talented guy and just a nice person to boot. Mm-hmm. In that, I was very spoiled in that he had gotten his first time director jitters, which manifest themselves in a variety of different ways with people. But he knew exactly what kind of movie he was trying to make. It was incredibly lean. We had about a 15-person crew. And, it was a very fast moving train that I was very fortunate to jump on because, it opened up a, enormous, network of collaborators that I, continue to work with to this day. And
you also had Kevin Bacon in that, if I'm not mistaken.
We did, yes. And
the Kevin Bacon.
Yes, I'm 1 degree, 0 degrees. I do know Kevin Bacon. He was enormously talented. So, just the guy could not have been nicer or more humble. And, I would also say, Cameron Manheim and Shea Wiggum, in addition to the boys, mm-hmm. It was just a very tight knit, community. And it's been really fun seeing all the cool stuff that Shay's been doing these days. I loved seeing him in Homecoming and, Kevin's been working with a couple of my other collaborators on a new Showtime show.
Now, where do you see independent film going from your perspective?
It's hard. It's obviously hard to guess.
No, of course.
I would say, as I've grown up a little bit, it's easy to get discouraged by, kind of people who are tracking various film markets. Mm-hmm. A lot of independent film is obviously, driven by, that process. It's weird because, as I was one thing I wasn't taught in film school that would have been helpful, was, the process of foreign sales. Mm-hmm. And, that I was entering, in about 2013, I was entering the industry at a time where that was, was still a very foreign sales driven indie process. And, mm-hmm. Folks like Kevin Bacon got movies like Cop Car made. And, just like any experience, if you don't, be honest about what you don't know, and somebody will hopefully explain it to you or just hang up. And I would say, I've cautiously watched as companies have kind of moved away from foreign sales where, actor value isn't the first part of the conversation. It never really sat well with me, as a producer, as somebody who's kind of putting all the pieces together, that a director would be forced to work with an actor because of some perceived value in Azerbaijan. But this is the business I chose to work in. So, anyway, I mention this because things are obviously evolving, and we have, many of my friends who are traveling to Cannes right now and likely selling foreign on some of their movies. So best of luck.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
But that's a definite turn. And I would also say from the way that some of these streaming companies approach acquiring finished films in, their preference for worldwide deals, creates a little bit more of a complicated situation if a producer has kind of syndicated out, some level of foreign sales. They often have to kind of unwind some of those deals, carve out, specific territories that ultimately, affect the sale price of the movie. But, that's all very cynical stuff. I would say, in terms of indie film, this is an amazing time to be kind of breaking into the industry because there's, I think, information has been democratized in such a way that, you're able to learn how to make a movie basically from YouTube and with resources like you run and, the kind of, perspective that you share, so I think, gone are the days of, people like James Cameron going to the USC library and reading every book on filmmaking. I think you can you have everything at your fingertips and, you have the ability to kind of create or join a community, of people who, want to support each other and are able to do so because, at the end of the day, this is a team sport, despite, the many organic ways that projects began. So kind of a roundabout answer, honestly, but I remain very excited about the independent film space. And, I think there's more buyers than ever as well.
Oh,
so
God,
that will drive, I think that's a good thing for everybody. And everyone has a different mandate. Everyone has a different level of reach and a different platform for getting to their audience. And I think just having flexibility in terms of, knowing where some of these movies, if they may be quote unquote less commercial or, more art house, what have you, having outlets, so these movies can be seen in a way or shared in a way other than word of mouth is good for everybody.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
Watch a ton of movies. And if you like the movie, watch it again. And then maybe one more time. Really try to crawl inside material you enjoy. I would say make as many short films as you can. Try to work in the commercial space if you're struggling to pay the bills. Or if you want to, all this stuff, every piece of the process in filmmaking seems to, occurs to me to be a, kind of like flexing a muscle. So why not, exercise it? And, I would, as I had alluded to before, I think, over the years, I've learned just the value of having, a network and community, and it's okay to come to LA or New York or wherever you live, and not know anybody. That's what the internet is for. That's what, going to the movies is about. I think trying to find people who are interested in telling similar stories to you or wildly different, it will inform your process and allow you to support one another.
Can you tell me the book that had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Oof. Well, I'm biased. Ed Catmull's creativity
love that
was
book.
A bit of a Bible to me. That is a great read. I would say The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño made a major impression on me. I tend to read almost everything that New York Review of Books puts out. All of these things kind of inform my process, and I make a point, despite the fact that a lot of my day is taken up reading, which I enjoy, and it's kind of integral to my being. I would say I do make a point to also read for pleasure. and not only read things that, can easily be set up as movies, which is a hole that I've seen several of my friends fall into.
Right. You can't just read a book anymore without thinking, oh, can I option this?
Yeah, or feeling like it's a waste of time if you continue. I think I try to just put that, take that hat off for a second, just enjoy something, especially if it's a different discipline that I'm, aware of already.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Wow. I would say, it's back to, the value of a network. One of my criticisms with USC, and this may have been just what I took from it, or I maybe missed that day of class, was, the importance of building a network. And that's kind of the point of going to film school in a way, is you can, as you had said earlier, you can kind of learn many of these lessons in a, equally stressful environment professionally, where you're being paid to do it. And, so I would say, it was really the process of making Cop Car, where I got to see folks like Chris Ford and Jon Watts work together, Andrew Hassey, who, co-edited the film. All these guys had known each other since freshman year of college at NYU and had kind of stuck together, and they're part of an amazing collective of filmmakers called Waverly. That includes Duncan Skiles and Ben Dickinson and Jake Schreier, among others. And, that was a really sobering lesson, because I basically, I started NQ while I was in my, last year of college. And, because of my interests, in animation and documentary work, as I had, outlined before, I didn't necessarily find my tribe at USC. And so, I was lucky in that I lived in LA for a little while. I had I had a few random personal connections to people who seemed to know what they were doing. But really, I think the importance of, surrounding yourself with great people you want to collaborate with, people who have approached things differently than you and who can really challenge your material. Often it's my closest friends who give the harshest notes, and there's a time and place for that. I can't stress that stuff enough. And I just have, totally selfishly benefited from, falling in with these groups of, talented filmmakers who take care of one another, just like our sister company, Green Card Pictures in New York.
Now, what is the biggest fear you had to overcome in making your first few films?
I think being exposed as somebody who didn't know what they were doing. One thing that became clear after a little while was that no one really knew what they were doing.
Amen.
And that's part of a process. And one of the things that I've definitely articulated, to other folks I've spoken to in the past is that, for the first couple of years, I was waking up sick to my stomach every single day. And I was afraid of virtually every different situation the first time I went through it. And that feels natural, and I think that was a symptom of, pushing myself, very, very hard and kind of jumping in with both feet. So I would say, being exposed as somebody who didn't know what they were doing, or, making a mistake and, holding up the process or making things more difficult for other people. That doesn't really feel like it's in the job description for a producer. And so I was constantly, worried about, causing unintended consequences, but you learn to, get over that and, own your process.
And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Apocalypse Now, definitely number 1. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Good choices.
And then maybe a tie between Clueless and, let's see, Night Train to Munich.
That's out of all 4 of those, one of those films doesn't belong with the others. I don't know why. I've never heard. I've got over 300 and odd number interviews here, and I've asked that question. I've never heard Apocalypse Now, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Clueless all in the same grouping. And Clueless, I personally enjoy and love, but I've just never heard that combination. So very, very interesting combo.
Good.
Now, where can people find you and more information about what you're doing?
On our website, nq.com. in addition, there's other, I'd alluded to them before, but greencardnewyork.com also has some resources and information about some of the filmmakers that we work with and support in the commercial production space, which, as I've said before, is an amazing way to make a living and, learn the different, processes that go into, making, movies, commercials, shorts, TV shows, all of that. I do not have a large social media presence, so you'll have to dig to find me. Okay. I am on the Screenwriting Reddit.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
So I will hopefully pop in and out with some hopefully helpful advice from time to time.
Yes.
And, otherwise, I think using the contact form on our website to reach out, I think is always a helpful, way to get in touch.
Andrew, man, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an eye-opening experience talking to you about technology and about your perspective on the business. So thank you for dropping some knowledge bombs on the tribe today.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
So what did we learn today? That we should all just forget about being in the film business and forget about writing screenplays because AI is going to take over. I mean, obviously. Well, guys, it was a great... First of all, I want to thank Andrew for coming on the show and helping us go into a deep dive into AI and what it can actually do for this business. Now, I think there is a place for AI. I think there is going to be a place for AI in multiple industries around the world, and I don't think the film industry is going to be much different. There's going to be ways that AI is going to be incorporated into our industry and into our business, into our day-to-day life as filmmakers and screenwriters, for that matter. It will happen. It is happening in many ways today, so just keep an eye out. It's always good to keep your ear to the grindstone to see what's coming around the corner because that's where the opportunities lie. That's where, people who are afraid of new technology, people who want to stick to the old way of doing things, they're the ones that get left behind. The first people on YouTube, the first people to shoot with a Red camera, the first people to edit digitally as opposed to on a flatbed, the first people to go on a streaming service and start releasing their film streaming. All of these innovators, the ones that jump out front of things, they're the ones that take over the industry, and they're the big boys or big girls or the big dogs in that space. And that's what you always got to look for. You don't look at what's going on now. You look at what's coming around the corner and try to anticipate as much as you can to jump in on a new platform, a new technology before anybody else does. Sometimes it pops, sometimes it doesn't. But I truly do believe that AI will have a place in our business, in a very significant place in the years to come. Now, if you guys live in the LA area, tomorrow, July 18th at 7 p.m. at The Parlor, I will be doing a Q&A at the ISA Network event. It's already a packed house already. From what I hear, they've sold over 100 tickets already, which is great. So I'm hoping a lot of people will show up. So I will be there, and I'll put the address and links to that event in the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/332. I hope to see you guys out there. And if you haven't already, please head over to filmmakingpodcast.com. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to the show. It really helps us out a lot. It really does. So thank you for listening. That's the end of another episode of the Indie Film Hustle podcast. As always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.